I think we'll see at the end of the introduction to Fleur that exactly the focus, this wonderful lady has definitely got the compass focused on the right direction regarding economics. It's an honor and a pleasure to introduce Fleur. Fleur grew up in Gibraltar and studied at the King's College London University. She qualified as a barrister in Middle Temple in 1997 and practiced in London before immigrating to Israel in 2001. In Israel, she worked at JDC in resource development for Europe and later became the executive director of Tikva, a non-profit organization saving abandoned and abused children, Jewish children from the former Soviet Union. In 2011, she set up her own communications consulting business, Message Experts, and does consulting work for large corporations and as well as non-profit organizations on effective communication strategies. In May 2016, Fleur became a city councillor in Jerusalem, and in the following year, in February, she was the leader of the opposition. In November 2018, Fleur was re-elected to the Jerusalem Municipal Council and was appointed Deputy Mayor for Foreign Relations, Economic Development, Tourism. Fleur is currently the only British politician in Israel, and she is involved in the advancement of women's rights and marginalized population groups in the city in economic development and for the fight of pluralistic Jerusalem. Fleur is also the co-founder of the UAE Israel Business Council and the Gulf Israel's Women's Forum. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to welcome Fleur to address us as a friend and as a colleague.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you very much. So good evening. It's wonderful to be here. I was saying to Doron earlier that last night I was at an event at the AACI, so this is my week with Anglo Olim apparently. So it's fun to have a theme in every week. It's wonderful to be here. I always felt that I'm originally from Gibraltar, as Roy said, and I always felt that there's some type of connection between Gibraltar and South Africa in the sense that we're kind of ex-colonials, aren't we? And we're Anglos. And when people really can't figure out where I'm from, they just assume that I'm from South Africa because they can't place me. So for all those reasons, I feel very connected, and I look forward to making my first visit there at some point. But no, really what it's lovely is to see how Olim take care of other Olim. And that's really wonderful because unfortunately, I really don't think that this country knows how to absorb its immigrants anymore. I think they've lost it. And I think that this country's also lost the understanding of what an asset Olim can be in the country and how the country can be represented so well by Olim. And so instead of seeing us as a burden, they should be seeing us as a strategic asset to the state of Israel. And I'm not going to rest until they see things that way. So that's my promise to you. I'm not quite sure about the whole Jerusalem economic powerhouse, but I'm going to be talking about a lot of economics. And I'm going to be talking about the way we're trying to do things and make things better. Oh. Thank you. I fall all the time, you're right. So I'll talk a little bit about mainly our challenges as a city and why these challenges don't just affect the city of Jerusalem but affect everyone else. But how I also think that the solutions are here in Jerusalem. So just a little bit of background. Jerusalem, as many of you know, is the largest city in the state of Israel. But most people don't understand how much larger it is than the next city. So Jerusalem is almost 1 million people. Does anybody know what the next largest city is? Tel Aviv. How many people live in Tel Aviv?
600,000.
Nearly 500,000. So we're double the size physically and also population-wise than Tel Aviv. So we're also, and this is where the economic challenges, this is where they stem from, we're also the most diverse city in the country. Now, not only are we diverse because we have here so many different immigrants from so many different places. You walk down the street, you hear French, Spanish, English, you hear everything. So we're diverse in riches. We are actually the first immigrants absorption city of the country. Every year we have a little competition with Tel Aviv, but we're still kind of got the edge. Not that everybody stays here, but a lot of people start off here when they make Aliyah. But more significantly than the numbers that are coming here, which is, let's say, 3,000 olim a year, 3,500 olim a year, we are the most diverse city in the country because two of the largest minorities in the state of Israel live in their largest numbers here. Who are they? The Haredim and the Arabs. Now, in the whole country, there's 13% Haredim. In the city? 25, double. In the whole country, there's 20% Arabs. In the city? Almost 40%, double. Which means we have double the intensity and double the challenges of any of the rest of the country. And because of the sizes of these population groups, Jerusalem is also the largest Arab city in the country, and Jerusalem is also the largest Haredi city in the country, bigger than Bnei Brak. Just the students in our educational system, which is over 300,000, is larger than the third largest city in the country. Just to give you a context on size. So, okay, it means we have a lot of human capital, right? The main problem in Jerusalem is that our workforce participation is the lowest in the country. We're about 51%. Now, that means that the capital city of the state of Israel, the capital city of the Jewish people, is also the poorest city in the country. And what's interesting, sad, or concerning is that the demography of Jerusalem today reflects the future demography of the state of Israel. So people say, and numbers have been done, that in 20 years' time, the country will have a third Arabs and a third Haredim and a third the rest of us, right? In our wonderful pluralistic glory. From this to that. Now what's going to happen in the state of Israel in 20 years when 2/3 of the population have got the lowest workforce participation in the country? What's going to happen to our wonderful startup nation? And this is why Jerusalem is significant. Mitzion Titzei Torah, right? From Zion, Torah. Now Torah is not just the 5 books and the commentaries. Torah is any methodology that can make things better. So I'm an eternal optimist, because otherwise I wouldn't be in politics. I think the politicians who are pessimistic should stay home, because they've got nothing to offer. I'm an optimist, and so I see Jerusalem as the laboratory for the models and solutions that we need to develop, not just to save the capital city of the state of Israel and the Jewish people, to save the entire country in 20 years' time. Anything that works here will work there. We're the beta side, we're the laboratory. If it works here, it can work anywhere, because there's no more diversity anywhere than there is in Jerusalem. And so we're very conscious of that. I'm very conscious of that. And so I asked the mayor when he got elected and I got elected, I said to him that I wanted 3 portfolios. I wanted foreign affairs, I wanted economic development, and I wanted tourism. At the time, I threw in tourism because I thought that would be my fun portfolio. I didn't expect COVID to come along and tourism become the nightmare portfolio. But all of my portfolios kind of blend into each other. And it's all about how do we increase prosperity in the city, how do we present the city to the world, and how do we bring the world to the city. So that's essentially what I do in City Council. And the numbers are getting a little better. So there is some optimism. Let me just go back a little and explain to you why the workforce participation amongst Haredim and Arabs is so low. You may know some of the explanations, and some of them I may be telling you something new. But basically it all goes back to the educational system. So if we look at the Haredi educational system, the boys, they stopped teaching them core curriculum subjects at age 11. So they don't learn math anymore. From age 11, they don't learn English, they don't learn science. So a Haredi boy who does not want a life in kollel is basically good for packing shelves in a supermarket, because they won't be able to go to university because they don't have the basic education to get to university. So what the Haredi leaders are doing is giving their people no choice. There's nothing wrong with giving them an education system, and then they can choose. You want a kollel life? Vakasha. You want a life of working? Vakasha. But what they do is they give the boys no choice. The only equivalence of this is the Amish in America, which stopped teaching their boys and girls core curriculum subjects at age 11. So they never leave their community. This is very deliberate. This is to keep them in and not let you go out, because we're giving you no options to get out. And now the girls, they learn core curriculum till 18 because they are the breadwinners and they're the baby makers and they do everything. They're exhausted. And the men who choose study at Life of Torah learning, and there's many men who just waste their time. I've had Haredim tell me, you should send everybody to work. I say, give 10% of the best Torah scholars, triple the money, and let everybody else go to work. This is a purely Israeli invention. The biggest rabbis in our history worked. And so this is a purely Israeli invention that has created a real social problem. Why? Because 50% of the Haredi population live in abject poverty. And abject poverty brings a lot of social issues, brings abuse in the family, brings God knows what. These things come together. And so that's the situation of the Haredim. And of course, because they hold the balance of power, you can't change it. You can't decide that you're going to tell the Haredim, that's it, you have to learn co-curriculum, that's the law of the country. Because then they'll bring down the coalition. And so they're holding us all by the neck with this. But the worst thing is that the country cannot survive this. Stanley Fischer, when he was the governor of the Bank of Israel, he said, when something has to stop, it will stop. The Haredim cannot become a third of the country in 20 years' time, where 50% of the men are not working. The whole economy will collapse. The question is, will we make the economic changes in time to save our economy? Or will we need a collapse before we redo the social contract with the Haredim? So I went to visit Menachem Friedman, who is the foremost, I think he passed away, he's the foremost scholar on Haredim. I actually did a master's in Hebrew University on conflict research, management and resolution. And I decided to do my thesis on Haredim. And I called my thesis the Zionist identity of Haredim. You might say, well, that's a contradiction. But my contention in my thesis was that Haredim are becoming more Zionist. They just don't want to use the word Zionism. But in fact, their children are Israelifying more. So that was kind of my thesis, which gives me hope. It gives me hope that even though the Haredim are going to be a third of the population, they're not going to be the same Haredim. I took my daughter, I was invited to go to a small private concert with Ishai Rebo and all these nice singers. And I sat there and 80% of the room were Haredi, modern Haredim. The men sitting with their wives, oh my God. And and I said to myself, this is hopefully what the Haredim in 20 years are going to be like. Just a little more chilled out, And so, that's the situation. So at the moment things are not great. But, Mitzion Titzei Torah. In Jerusalem, we really are the social and educational entrepreneurs of the country. And we created an alternative school system for Haredi boys called Memlachti Haredi, government Haredi schools. And they learn all the core curriculum subjects and all the Torah subjects that we're getting in their regular Haredi schools. We've opened 10 schools like that in the city. We've been fought tooth and nail by the Haredi leadership the whole way, but there's a waiting list of these modern Haredim saying enough is enough. So, yeah, it's a drop in the bucket, but at least we've started. The other thing we're doing for the kids who are not lucky enough to have had this alternative school system is doing these immersive pre-university programs. So these poor kids are learning in 7 months, 7 years of high school. And I've got friends who say to me, you know how hard it is, Fleur, to learn 8th grade algebra when you're 20? Because your brain's already developed in different ways. You're not used to it. When you break that, continuity of the work you're doing, it's very difficult to go back. And so these kids, with the Hebrew University, Azrieli College, of course, Machon Lev, they specialize in this. We take and we make these intense, immersive programs. I mean, these guys have been learning. They know how to learn. They know how to sit their tuchus down for 10 hours a day. They can learn. But we have to kind of rethink the way that we're trying to immerse them into academia through these type of programs. And the last thing that we're doing, and I'm very involved in this as well, is setting up entrepreneurship programs, innovation programs for young Haredi guys, startups, even ones without an education. Some of them have incredibly creative ideas, and so they find partners that can actually do the stuff that they do less. And we have a couple of big initiatives in the city, one called RavTech, the other one, which is not based in the city but is also involved, Canatech. And so basically exposing Haredim to the world of high tech. The women, Haredi women, are already in high tech. And so what I'm doing there for the Haredi women, who normally get paid the worst salaries because the employers know they can get away with it, what we're doing is I created a program taking Haredi women and Arab women actually and giving them skills to be able to advocate for themselves, higher pay, promotions, thinking through the strategy and ambition for their mobility up the ladder in high-tech companies. We've already had 5 cohorts. 70% of the women who graduated my program have received promotions and pay rises. And so we're trying to provide all the tools that we can to be fair to the Haredi population, to give them what their leadership has spent many years taking away from them, and to give them the choice. I don't judge somebody who wants a life of Torah and study, but I don't want them to do it because they had no choice. They should do it because they chose it, not because they didn't choose it. And so that's our work in the city. And again, going back to the point, whatever we do here, whatever model works, will be applied to the rest of the country. We are the lab. Okay, so what are we doing about Arabs? So Arabs is a bit more complicated in a way and less complicated in other ways. Arabs want to work. We don't have a religious fight with them about not working. But again, let's look at their educational system. In the city of Jerusalem, for some historic screw up, I don't know how else to explain this, 80% of the kids are learning from the Palestinian Authority school book. Now, apart from the fact, and we're paying for it, that's the best, we're paying for it. So apart from the fact that incitement, glorification of martyrs, they hate us, we're not here, we shouldn't be here, they're going to kick us out, all of that very toxic narrative they get from the day they're born, on top of all of that, they don't teach them Hebrew. And so when they graduate high school, they do not speak the language of the city that they can go on to university or get a good job in. And again, this is the Palestinian Authority's very deliberate anti-normalization strategy. That's what we're dealing with over here. So, what are we doing about them? Well, the good news is that we started realizing that tons and tons of Arab young kids were starting to learn Hebrew. And there were all these language schools opening up in East Jerusalem that were substandard. Arabs teaching Arabs Hebrew who could barely speak Hebrew themselves. And so I went to the mayor and I said, listen, let's focus on one thing. Let's just flood the market with Hebrew. Let us pay for it. Let's do as much as we can do so that it's readily available to them and there's no barriers to entry of them into language and university. So we've been doing that. And again, Azrieli College, Hebrew University, they've all opened up pre-university programs to learn Hebrew in 6 months. So the Haredim are learning 7 years of high school in 7 months, and the Arabs are learning Hebrew. And we have a mechina for each one of these population groups. And the Arabs actually learn Hebrew pretty good, pretty fast, because Arabic is not so far. Also, they pick it up. It's the language. All they have to do is go immerse themselves, and it happens. And we're seeing more Arab men and women in colleges and university in the city than ever. And so what I'm making sure is by the time they graduate university, they also have an easy entry into high tech. Because you have to remember that the Arabs don't have something that we have, and that is the Jewish connection, right? You know somebody, you know a cousin, you know went to the army with this one. They don't have that. And so we have to create those pathways into, and there's some huge companies like Intel who've got a minority inclusion program and a women's advancement program. It's a very trendy and very welcome thing in the big companies in the high-tech world. They're really trying to be diverse. They're trying to be inclusive. And so we're riding on that wave to get in more Arab young men and women, because it's in our interests for East Jerusalem to advance economically. Because if they're making 35,000 shekels a month, you bet your bottom dollar nobody's going to be throwing a rock. Right. And that's what it's about. I believe in peace through economic development and through providing opportunities, and everybody, can actually self-actualize and they don't fall victims of the extremism and the brainwashing that you see sometimes in these parts. Unfortunately, yesterday we discovered that the people who put the bomb in the bus stop a couple of weeks ago were from East Jerusalem. This is paid for by the Israeli government.
And a university graduate.
Mm-hmm. And a university graduate, yeah. Because the incitement is endless. And so what I want to do in this government, I think I'll be able to manage it, is pass a law that makes it illegal for the Israeli Educational Ministry to fund any school not teaching the Israeli curriculum. I don't need them to learn a Zionist curriculum. I need them to learn the Arab-Israeli curriculum, the one that Arab kids are learning all across the country. Arabic first language, Hebrew second language, Bagrut. They're learning this fakakta tawji thing that is substandard and is teaching them incitement. And so these programs are a little bit trial and error, but we learn constantly and we widen the pool of programs constantly. And so the numbers are moving in the right direction. Jerusalem was one of the lowest high-tech employers in the country. For example, in Tel Aviv, high-tech workers are 17% of the working population. In Jerusalem, we started off, it was 3. We've gone up to 7. And the reason we managed to do it, and this is how my political activity started, is because I was part of a group of people 7 years ago that lobbied the local government to put money towards funding an innovation ecosystem, opening accelerators and communities and all sorts of things. And today we're doing incredible work with academia and industry working together so that we can already grab these students before they get to leave the city and give them good jobs. We're building 3 high-tech towers in Hebrew University Givat Ram campus. We're building the entrance of the city. Har Chotzfim is already full. And so again, we have to be patient, and I'm not known for my patience, but the needle is moving in the right direction, even if it's not moving fast enough. So these are the programs that we have in place. And again, it's crucial not just for the city, it's crucial in the long term for the country. Now I'll say a few words about the Abraham Accords, and I think what I'm going to do is stop and let you ask any question you want, because I think it's more fun when it's a dialogue rather than a monologue. So 2 years ago, a friend of mine, Doran Barak, said, this was before the Abraham Accords were signed, before we even knew they were coming, and he said to me, you know, I've got a feeling that something is cooking with the Emirates. And he said to me, because there's a lot of under the radar normalization going on. And so Doran and I created the UAE Israel Business Council, and it was kind of quiet at the beginning, and then the next thing we know, they're announcing that we're going to be signing peace, which is incredible. Within a week of the announcement, we had an online platform. Today we have about a community of about 7,000 businesses, 50-50 Israeli Emiratis, which is really what to me surprised me. I've been there many, many times. I've been to Bahrain. I also created a Gulf Israel Women's Forum that has in it women who are in countries who haven't even made peace with us yet, like Saudi Arabia and Indonesia. And I have women from Egypt and Jordan who say to me, well, why didn't we do any of this when you made peace with us? I'm like, because that peace was very different to this peace. That peace was very kind of top level strategic, and it's not going to be filtering down to regular people. And you know that because none of us have Egyptian friends, right? I have many Emirati friends in contrast. These people wanted peace with us. They're curious about us. They ask so many basic questions about Judaism. They were brainwashed for many years. And about 10 years ago, the government of the UAE took out the incitement and the brainwashing in the educational curriculum. And the good news is that a year ago, Saudi took out most of the incitement in their curriculum, which means that they're laying the ground for a future normalization and peace with the State of Israel. And once that happens, game over for the Arab-Israeli conflict. It's over. Our conflict, the Middle East, has been redivided into the countries that want peace and prosperity and the countries that want extremism and destruction. And thankfully, we have allies now in the Arab world on our side of that aisle. And so I believe that the Abraham Accords don't just pose an incredible economic opportunity for all of us, for the Arabs in Israel. Every time I fly to the UAE, half the plane is Israeli Arabs, half the plane. And so it poses also an opportunity to make the Palestinians understand that their strategy of rejectionism and intransigence for the last 75 years has not just gotten them nowhere, it's gotten them less than nowhere. And so once we've made peace with all the Arab countries, they really will have absolutely no choice than to sit down, put down their arms and talk, peaceful resolution, economic resolution, whatever it is that's going to look like. But the road to that comes through the normalization that we're currently involved with the rest of the Gulf. So I think I'm going to stop.
Great.
Thank you very much. And you really can ask me anything you want. I'm in the Jerusalem City Council. It's normally a zoo, and I've developed a few skins already. Yes.
So I have a question. First of all, I'd like to commend you on the amazing work that you've done and the progress that's been made.
Thank you.
One of the things that concerns me a lot, and I think others as well, is the cost of housing here in Jerusalem. So in order for us, from my point of view, in order for us to grow and expand and have people live here, we have to have affordable housing.
Yes.
And then if there's affordable housing and then there could also be affordable rents for stores and industry and whatever. And that's...
Yeah. So let me tell you why housing is expensive. It's very simple.
Commercial space, food.
No. Housing is expensive because supply can't keep up with demand.
Beyond belief.
Simple as that.
Yes, but
You don't need space to build 40 stories.
everything that's being built is being luxury.
It's luxury.
It's luxury.
It's for foreign people from.
Well,
Can I make a comment on that, on your point? I spoke to several people at the Reserve Bank, the Israel Bank of Israel, and they indicated to me that the reason why housing is so high is, as you say, supply and demand, but that is really because the government restricts the release of land.
Yes.
Why? Because there's a huge lobby from the bank, from banks in Israel, to keep prices high, and that's why, by the way, when this whole subprime crisis hit the world, Israel was to a large extent protected because of this. I'm not saying that it's this particular model is a recipe to go on forever, because we need affordable housing. But the main reason is because the government is restricting the release of land. To
it is,
do
you're
construction.
100% right. There's a lot of problems. One of them is the reason why supply is not enough is because we don't have enough release of lands. It's funny, I spoke to somebody yesterday, there was a business conference in the city, and I spoke to somebody yesterday who was going to become the head of the Israel Lands Authority. And I said to him, what is so complicated about releasing land? Explain it to me. Maybe I'm being simple about this. He says to me, because the release of land has got so many layers of things and laws and regulations that it affects, that nobody can get it done. I don't accept that.
Wow.
When you want to get something done, you get it done.
Right.
Like, we didn't build a country out of a desert, for God's sake. We can't solve the housing crisis. So yeah, that's correct. In the city of Jerusalem, we have an added problem, and that is that the bureaucracy for getting a building permit is ridiculous. I always say in City Hall, a third of people don't do any work. A third of people work very hard, and the third, depending on who they're sitting next to, they either work or they won't work. Honestly. And when I ran for office the last time in 2018, I proposed a whole plan for making the system a little bit more efficient. Some people, it takes them 5 years to get a building permit. The whole of Israel, we're 50% slower than the average OECD countries to get a building permit. In Dubai, you get a building permit in 2 weeks. And you can bring 200 Indians to work on the building. Work permits is another thing we don't know how to do. So I'm with you, but this mayor, what he's tried to do is at least make sure that we're not the bottleneck. In other words, when there are buildings that are already in the planning, to try and move things along. As a result of the major infrastructural development of the light rail, which we've approved the extension of the current line, 2 more lines, and in the next 20 years there'll be another 5 lines. In other words, in 20 years, God knows where we're all going to be, but you'll be able to go anywhere in the city on a light rail. You won't want to use your car. That's the idea. And it's not unpleasant like an underground. It's a hop in and off. It's actually kind of nice. I take it sometimes. I used to be head of transport. My husband was like, what? You're the worst driver. You get fines all the time. How could they have made you head of transport? So that's what we're trying to do. Now, why is the train important? Because anybody building on the train line has got times 400% rights. In other words, if you have a right, if you're on a train line and you have a 100-meter house and you have a right to build another 100 meters, if you're on a train line, you can build 400 meters. This is an incredible incentive for people to build.
I know that.
Oh yeah. All down Derech Hebron, if you guys know where it is going to be Manhattan.
But why do we?
Because the only way is up. You can't tell me you got to build to bring the prices down. And no, why 40 stories? We can't have it all. We can't have it all. And you know what? Derech Hebron towards the end, Megillah, there's not so much history there. We're protecting the historical neighborhoods. But the neighborhoods that are not historic, like the entrance of the city, Yeah, we're building Israeli towers in the entrance of the city.
Sorry, there's a beautiful building up by the train station. They knocked down that building. What are they doing that building there?
What?
Next to the train station is a building. They knocked it down. They put the stones on the side. What are they doing with that building?
They're going to reconnect the stones and they're going to build a bigger building.
Because that's such potential area, it's so beautiful area.
But we're 3,000-year-old city. Anything before 48 is preserved. You know what our problem is? We can't. Nobody's ever happy. You look at the city. On the west side of the city, you got a green belt, so the Greens are complaining. And on the east side of the city, the whole world is complaining because we're building on occupied territory. Give me a break. We're caught between a rock and a hard place, literally. And now you tell me you don't want 40 stories. So what do we do? What do we do? Build underground?
The way, but it just doesn't fit Jerusalem.
It doesn't fit this Jerusalem. Go to Gilo. Does it fit there? Of course it does. What does it matter? That's the only way is up. Believe me, I'm with you. I would rather not, but you want cheaper housing. You want more housing.
But that's not cheaper housing when you're building up those...
Oh yes.
Are you
It's all about demand and supply. It's all about demand and supply. I'm against building tall buildings in neighborhoods where the character of the neighborhood is going to change. You tell me what the character of Deep Derech Hebron is. It's not very nice. Let's be honest. There's shikunim there that have to be redone. People living like dogs in these places. These people, we need to give them better buildings. We need to upgrade the buildings, and nobody's going to do it if they don't have an incentive of building more floors.
You don't have to do 40
10 years, there's no more Nahoum.
20, 30. We're negotiating stories now. Ultimately, it's about young people being able to afford an apartment in the city.
Right.
That's what it's about.
Right.
And so there's always going to be somebody annoyed about something. You have to just make a decision and do it. Thankfully, and I thank God every day, I am no longer on the building and planning committee. Yes.
You said that you felt that if the Arabs were making money and more prosperous, that we would have more peaceful negotiations and relations with them. So I remember years ago, my brother lived in Karnei Shomron, and so we had to drive through Kalkilia to get to it. And every year, Kalkilia was getting more prosperous. Tel Avivians would go there on Saturday and they would shop there. There was a promenade being built. There were roses being built. There were beautiful mansions being built. And what happened? That became the center of terrorism.
It's because...
Now, why did that happen? I mean, they were making money and they were having good relations with Israelis.
No, only 10% of people making money. The rest were in the gutter because the Palestinians are the most corrupt people in the world. And so they benefit from the conflict, they enrich themselves, and they keep they keep people down and poor and angry and an open wound and brainwashed.
So the fact that the city was getting more beautiful didn't affect most of the people.
There's not many terrorists coming out of Ramallah, I can tell you. You know, it's normally from the worst neighborhoods. Look, I'm not saying that it's foolproof. All I'm saying is that economic prosperity gives them something to lose. Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned about peace with the Saudis. And I would like to believe that everything will be honey and sweet. But last night on television, I heard the gentleman, he's perfect English speaking, with his gear, he had a kafir and all that. And he said, yes, but there'll always be that underlying feeling with the Palestinians.
Yeah?
So blood is thicker than water.
Yes and no. They have to say that. They're all trapped in their own rhetoric. I'm telling you. You know what people tell me behind closed doors in the UAE? I have no idea what they tell me about the Palestinians. I was in a Zoom with the ambassador to Washington and of the UAE, and there was a Palestinian, me and him, and he said to the Palestinian guy, we sent you a plane full of supplies before the COVID, and you turned it around and you turned it back. In the Arab world, that's a very big offense. So it's not so peachy with anybody. So sometimes you have to like ignore the rhetoric and just, work out what's going on. And you know what's going on in Saudi right now? That Israelis are building entire smart cities right now. Hundreds of Israeli companies there.
They need Israel. They all need Israel because of our knowledge and our...
Yeah, which is Jabotinsky's vision,
Yeah.
that ultimately people will make peace with us because it's good for them,
Of course.
not for us.
Of course.
It's always good for us, but it's even better for them.
The new legislation in Oman against Israel. Oman, the restrictive...
Oman, yeah.
How much of a threat is that to the Abraham Accords?
Two.
The Abraham Accords.
I'm disappointed because I really thought that Oman would have been one of the next countries to make peace with us. So there must be, look, anytime you hear something against Israel, just know this. There must be something going down in their country when they're trying to distract and deflect. That's what I'm saying.
The whole world does that.
Yeah.
The whole world does that.
Yeah. Blame the Jew. Everybody's favorite sport. Yeah.
Speaking to others, Israeli, they're finding it unaffordable in Israel. They did the last 2 years price, and they're leaving. I just wondered what the emigration rate from Israel is like.
I don't know about Israel. I can tell you about Jerusalem. We have about 7,000 people or 8,000 people leaving every year, which is not a lot. Most people live to buy houses, and most people are moving to the Gush area, Bet Shemesh, which doesn't bother me because the center of life still remains Jerusalem. Look, any capital city has people leaving. You go to London, you go to New York. How many people live in New York and leave, Manhattan to find? It's a natural thing. A lot of Haredim are leaving as well because they can't afford it either. I don't think it's concerning. In terms of the Israelis, I think there's about 1 million Israelis outside of Israel. It's a lot. That's a lot. It's 11% of our current population. 10% if you add them in. 10% of Israelis are not in this country. And they're correct. I think we pay too much for imports. And the reason we pay too much for imports, we have free trade agreements with most people, but this kind of monopoly on distribution and the regulation. Bibi promised now that he's going to get rid of something completely useless called Machon Atkanim, which is basically, it's the authority that if you buy a washing machine from Germany, before it gets to your house here, there's another whole department in Israel that has to look at it, inspect it, and give it its own sticker. Now, if you're buying a Bosch and it's good enough for the Europeans, why do we need Israelis giving it the kosher certificate? It's ridiculous. So Bibi in the last election says, I'm getting rid of Machon Atkanim. These small things will make things cheaper by the time it gets to us. I think it's ridiculous. We're paying 120% tax on a car. And it's not like we have our own car manufacturing capabilities that we don't want to compete with ourselves. We don't make cars. So why are they charging us 120% to buy a car? To buy a car in this country is like buying 2.5 cars in America. It's a joke. Okay, they say to me, but Fleur, this was my Twitter argument last week with somebody, we have to discourage people from cars. I said, okay, I'm with you. Why don't you get rid of the tax on the electric cars? All right, you want it to be greener? Incentivize.
The moment they signed the Euro 1 Accord, they instituted a purchase tax of the same aliquot as the customs. I imported pasta machines from Italy. It wasn't.
They charged you the customs, yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. We were a country that at the time we needed it, we were built on socialist roots. And we're still got the vestiges of that. Bibi, to his credit, got rid of most of the union hold on the ports and on this and on that. But there's still a long way to go. We're not done.
In South Africa alone,
there's so many products that could be exported that are really cheap because South Africa's
Yeah.
production costs
I was just in
really
India.
cheap.
It was so cheap. Oh my God. But cheap, the things that we pay for a lot of money. Same things. Went to my kids, of course, Nike. They want to buy shoes. How much is a Nike pair of shoes here? Like a good one, 400 shekels, 500 shekels. I was in shock. It was like 30 euros in India. I was like, but it's Nike. It's not some fake. It was a proper Nike shop. So, oh, well, they manufacture it in India, and so they don't need to send it anywhere. It stays in. I said to my husband, it's worth coming here just to buy shoes for the kids. Yes.
I don't know if you can answer this, but it's estimated in the next, with regards to the unemployment, it's estimated that in the next 20 years' time, 50% of all jobs will be replaced by artificial intelligence and robots.
Yes.
So how do you factor that in?
Because there'll be new jobs.
In what way?
There'll be other jobs. You're talking about what you know today, but there'll be jobs that we haven't even thought of.
AI.
Where young people will go. More engineering, more programming. I don't know what they are yet. There are research institutes in this country that I've spent some time with that talk about future jobs. You can look it up actually. The Tau Center released a very interesting report. And there are jobs you can't find replacement for. You can't have a robot being a psychologist, right?
No, but AI can give us meeting permits in 2 weeks here.
So yes, there won't be 50% of the jobs you know, but there'll be new jobs we haven't even begun to imagine.
On 51% of the productivity in Jerusalem, I just ponder how accurate that figure is, just given the fact that, as you mentioned, there's a very large Haredi community here in Jerusalem, and there are thousands of young Haredi families that get married that have got parents sending thousands of dollars every month to them that support supermarkets, that support retail, and you just have to go to some of those Haredi communities.
Yes.
And it's mind-blowing.
And who's going to be supporting their children? And who's going to be supporting their grandchildren?
Well, we're jumping the gun now, but currently...
Not jumping the gun? It's not sustainable, what I'm saying is. It's just not sustainable.
No, currently. That may be the case.
Yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with productivity. I'm talking about workforce participation.
Okay, so tourism, that wouldn't be productivity then, or would it be?
I'm talking about workforce participation. That they come and they spend money here like tourists do. They're here for the year. They're not Israeli citizens. They're not residents of my city. They pay maybe property tax for a year. These are not the numbers that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the populations that are here. I'm not talking about the people spending a gap year here. Yet tourism in Jerusalem does better than other cities around the country. We are the most touristy city in the country. We are. And that's why during COVID we were very, very badly affected, unfortunately. But we've kind of bounced back now. A lot of people lost their livelihoods. They'll never get it back. But most of the people who managed to weather the storm bounced back. And I got a lot of grants from the government to try and help the people that needed a bit of oxygen to breathe until the tourists came back. And thank God they did. We're talking about a different metric. We're not talking about workforce participation here.
And what about the fact that it's a very high rate of employment, people employing Israelis from the States that are not on the books of the, where there's a lot of black.
Oh, the Haredim have a whole, and the Arabs, whole economy that is not declared. Whole economy. But that's going to last another, few years? There won't be cash in 5 years, so it can't last. I've got to say, I went to New York for a whole week. I did not change $1, and I didn't even need it. Uber, this, that. Nobody's using money anymore. It's incredible. So that's going to end. That's why it has to end, because there will be no paper money in 5 years. And so the Haredim and the Arabs working under the table, there'll be no table. The table will be see-through. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, should I just... Okay. So Fleur, I just want to thank you so much for a most inspiring and incredible talk and presentation. I just want to mention what you said about money. We were in London over Sukkot, and we went into a shop and they said, we don't take money.
Yeah.
It was incredible. I couldn't believe it.
Give it 3 years. There'll be money nowhere.
But another thing that you mentioned about Indonesia, that you have a connection with some ladies from Indonesia. So I was there in August. They had a world stamp exhibition, and we were the Israeli representatives. And I actually wore a yarmulke in the parliament, and I was very, very warmly accepted.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Half of Indonesia, one piece, the other half don't know what they
So,
want.
nothing's impossible, and I think it's going to happen. So on behalf of Wits University, we have there are many Wits students here, and many graduates, ex-Witsies living in Israel and especially in Jerusalem as well. So we're actually celebrating, in a few days it's going to end, but it's the centenary of Wits University. And I don't know if you all know that Wits, Nelson Mandela, he was actually at Wits. It was the one place, Wits and UCT, that blacks and whites throughout its history could study together. And apartheid didn't exist at Wits University. So I'm very proud to be like the Israeli representative of Wits University here in Israel. So this is just a small token of our appreciation.
Is this a blanket?
It's a blanket.
Oh,
You've come
wonderful.
back.
I love
hope
it.
that the weather will improve.
That's
but
wonderful.
It's a centenary of it. And thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. Thank you very much. It's lovely. Thank you, everyone. Oh, God, there's another present. Wait, it's Christmas again.
I thought of something very interesting and unique to give you in the name of Telfed, and it's very special. I'll explain it now. I had a chat with my brother, and he designed something very unique.
Oh, wow, beautiful.
But there's history to this. This stone is from Marat el-Machpelah.
Nice. I
This
love it.
stone is from near Kever Rachel. And the gold part of Beit HaMikdash is 24 karat gold plated.
Oh my gosh.
So
thank you so much.
Doing what you're doing for our city,
So
our beloved
kind.
city, a sweet lady as you are.
Aw.
And what I forgot to say at the beginning was there are lots of things about you that I like, but it's the accent. So my dear friend.
Thank you so much. You're the best.
Thanks.
Thank you. That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Got a photo?
I'm taking this home. I'm not leaving this in the office.
Wow.
I clean the box.
There's a special way.